Welcome, Alison.
Oh, it's so good to be with you, Teresa. Thank you so much for having me.
I so appreciate it. Um, I wanted to talk to you first about something we just did on another podcast episode regarding waiting. And I think there are a lot of people just waiting, thinking that they can't do anything about their situation or their condition or their life while they're confined to the four walls. And that's such an anxious state of being that it concerns me. And I wanted to know what your take was on that, or what you suggest to your own clients that maybe you're feeling like that.
That's a brilliant question. And by the way, and as you're asking me, I'm like, that's a really, really interesting question because it's not too unlike what we were doing in the real world, which is we want everything now. Like we live in a world of instant gratification. So now I want answers now. I want results now. That's where the whole, pill came from now. We want to be fixed now as well. And now we're in a situation where I'm seeing it every day with people where it's like, I don't want to wait. And one of the things as human beings that we have lost over time is having the ability to be patient. And we want to manifest our dreams now. And actually, when we begin to understand that patience is the key and that we learn more on the journey than we do when we get to the destination. So I always say to my clients, and what happens the day this ends, if that's what you're waiting for? Like what happens? And I keep saying to people, I've said from the start, if you were told today that we're all going back to normal, whatever that is, like I don't think anything would be normal again. But if you were told today that everything was going back to the way it was on Monday, what would you think? And pretty much 100% of my clients have sat with it, and I've done some breathing with them, and they've gone, but I wanted to do this, and I wanted to do that, and I wanted to clear out the kitchen, and I actually wanted to do stuff in that room, and actually there was another thing. And all of a sudden now we reframe it, and it's like, oh, hold on a second, there is actually loads of things I would like to get done. So it's interesting just to observe in this moment, because if you feel confined by the four walls, you feel that way out in the real world too, because it's your limited paradigm thinking. It's the condition-based driven world that we operate from. So what I teach people is dream building. I teach that you can dream your life into being no matter what your circumstances. I don't believe that we're a product of our circumstances or situation. And it's really from living a whole life of feeling trapped in my own circumstances. I come from a background of having mental health issues, being medicated for 20 years. I come from my own personal addiction background. And so I know that I always felt trapped and limited by what I had been told and by what was told to me about me. So it's interesting that when we begin to liberate ourselves and we begin to expand our thinking into a different type of thinking and a different way of being, we begin to see that anything's possible. And during this time, I have been working with clients who have experienced astonishing transformations, like astonishing transformations. Like one of my clients lost her job a few weeks ago and decided to just immerse herself in the dream building program. And now she has manifested a new job in the middle of quarantine. Like, she got a phone call. I have other clients who are like, okay, this is the time when they've lost their jobs. They're going to start putting down the blueprint for a new business. But I think more so than anything, we're hearing this all the time, Teresa. And I suppose when we hear it all the time, people go, oh, not another person who's saying, this is a time to go within and do that It was something that we hear a lot, often we begin to ignore. But this is a time and an opportunity for us to go within. It really is. It's a time for us to take a moment, have a pause, spend that little bit of time connecting with our hearts. Your heart, I always say to people, your heart is a portal. Dropping down into your heart, working with the heart energy is one of the most powerful things you can do in this life, no matter what the external circumstances or situations are.
Great. That actually kind of leads to another thing I wanted to ask you about. I've heard you say that it's an inside out world, and that kind of sounds like part of what you're talking about here. So could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so I really do believe, because I was trained I entered the modeling industry at the age of 15. So I was trained into a world where it was the external world gave you your set of values and self-esteem. So how I looked each day, how I showed up, and it also depended on what someone said about me. Like if that's what you're going to place your value and worth on every day, you're really walking a tightrope, of kind of not feeling very good and feeling vulnerable. And I used to wake up every day and go, oh, what will today bring? And I remember going into castings and people would look through my book and some of them wouldn't even look at you. They'd still stay in the conversation and go, yeah, thanks. And I'm like, you didn't even look at a photo. So when we wake up and we're waiting for someone else to validate who we are, we could be waiting our entire lives to hear the one thing that we're waiting to hear. And when I started to learn in my journey inwards through meditation, and I started the journey through meditation in my late teens. So there was two lives running parallel. There was the modeling fashion industry, and then I was going on these retreats all the time. And I was going on these retreats, and then I was coming back from the retreat and going back into my normal life and wondering what was wrong. But my consistency and my ability to show up for myself wasn't there. So I was looking for someone else to fix me. Like I was going on a retreat and I was sitting there and I was going, okie dokie, fix me. Same in a therapist chair, the same with the doctor. Fix me, tell me, give me something, tell me what I need to do. And through many years of practice, I realized that it was all inside of me. And one of my teachers used to say that to me. He used to say to me, Alison, you have everything you need contained within. And I'm thinking, right, not quite sure what he's on about, but I'll go with it. And actually it was when I had my son, and all of a sudden life wasn't about me anymore. It was about a little person who needed me to be awake and aware to look after him. And I suffered postpartum depression and I became really disappointed in myself. But what I realized is that what was happening to me postpartum was a similar thread that had been running through my entire life. It was just presenting in a different form. So it was that sense of not feeling good enough, trying to be superwoman, worried about what people thought on the outside. I was a single mom, so I kind of felt like I had this sense of responsibility to who I'm not quite sure, but I wanted people to see that I wasn't struggling and that I was able to do this and I could do it by myself. And I put enormous pressure on myself to do everything and go back to work and, put on this brave face. And then it all spectacularly fell apart in spectacular fashion. And what I realized in that moment was when I literally felt like I had nothing left, I just went within and I asked for help. And I really began to understand that when I went within, I was presented with answers and I was able to bit by bit by bit begin to work on myself and start to work on my self-esteem and change my daily habits and incorporate meditation daily and eat really good food and get out and connect with nature. And I all of a sudden started to see that there was another way to be, there was another way to live. And I was like, this is an inside out world. Because when I changed inside about how I felt, I became less concerned about what people thought of me from the outside. And, this is a lifetime of work. Like, I don't think anyone has this fully figured out. I think it's a lifetime of learning and growing and evolving. But one thing I know for sure is that we are spiritual beings and this body is just our house and it's a temporary home while we're here. So that spiritual aspect of us is always seeking a freer, fuller expansion of itself. And because I didn't see it that way and I felt that this avatar was everything, of course it was. I was in the modeling industry. I wasn't allowing my spirit to really expand and live the freer, fuller version of myself. So I was kind of living a very nervous, constricted, and, uptight kind of life. I was afraid of everything. I was afraid of everyone. I didn't really like being in my own world or with myself. And when I began to go inside, I began to allow myself to be a little bit more expansive. And it's a whole different energy because when you open up to the world opens up to you. And then, of course, I met the extraordinary Howard Martin from HeartMath, who I adore, and began to truly understand the power of working with the heart energy, which I never realized before. And began to understand that, the heart sends more signals to the brain than the brain does the rest of the body. And in this, modern world we live in, we have given our mind the power over everything. And we're trying to, solve our problems with the same mind that's created them, and we can't seem to get out of our own way and we can't seem to work through it. And then what we learn is just by dropping down into the heart and even placing your hand on your heart and connecting and activating your heart energy every day, you now begin to get access to a different part of yourself, to a different aspect of yourself that actually really knows who you are, you know, and now we start to open that door. And I always say to people, I have people I work with that when they're dropped down into the heart, and I work in healing as well, so I can feel people's energy and I can feel people that they're about to burst out crying, and that scares them. Because when we drop down into the heart, two things happen. First of all, vulnerability starts to emerge. And when people feel vulnerable, they get scared. It's a place they're not used to going. And so there's a tendency for people to panic and shut down at that point. But I always say to people, when you open the heart, you're opening your internal support system. And on one side, vulnerability emerges. But then in equal measures on the other side, we have courage, because that's where the word heart comes from. Cœur in French is heart. So your vulnerability is supported fully with your own courage. So when we work with the heart, now we're able to be vulnerable and courageous. So opening up that inner support system really gives us the courage to start accessing more of ourselves, more of our own true nature. And when we do that, we begin to be able to access a part of us and ask bigger questions like, what kind of life would I love to live? Because I know for years I was trapped in the, what can I do? What am I able to do? What am I qualified to do? What do I have enough money to do? I mean, the questions go on and on and on. So I always asked limiting questions and then wondered why I wasn't manifesting the life of my dreams. But when we ask different questions, we invite different answers in, and different quality answers as well. So what kind of life would I love to live? Now, that opens up a whole different energy. That question in and of itself is expansive and exciting. And we start to move into the world of possibility for ourselves. And I always encourage people to put down on paper whatever emerges in that moment. And the how is none of your business. We get so caught up with, but I need to know how, but I need to know how. And once we just gently push the how out of the way and we ask ourselves more expansive questions through a heart-centered connection, now we begin to tap into this inner passion and drive and purpose. People are always asking me, I always hear about my purpose and my passion, and I don't know. And I'm like, well, it will emerge when you just get quiet. Get quiet, trust, work with your heart, journal, be patient. Patience is coming up a lot for people. And it's one of my biggest life lessons, by the way, Teresa. Like, literally every coach I've ever worked with has said to me, and now we go into patience, Alison. And I think it's a human thing. I do. I think, you know, we need to be a little bit easier with ourselves, because we have just come out of a world that was moving at an alarming rate. And most people weren't even in their life at all. You know, they weren't present, they weren't experiencing their life. By the time they got home in the evening, they were exhausted. You know, they couldn't even connect with their family. So I think there's so much going on at the moment in the world, and we just need to be a little bit patient with ourselves and maybe just take a step back and just be okay with where you are right now.
I totally agree. And we're seeing it all over the place, people losing patience already. And it's like, oh, we still have a ways to go. You really got to tap into that patience factor. Um, I think kind of along those same lines, a lot of people also have trouble or challenges around finding the positive in
Mm,
something that at first glance looks like it's all negative.
mm.
And I'm a firm believer in there's always an upside to everything. I mean, that's the balance of life. You know, it's good for somebody and it's bad for some, you know what I mean? It always equals out. So I'm just wondering, just personally, you know, are you finding any positives that are coming out of this shutdown and being contained more at home and, you know, everything that we're going through right now?
It's really interesting that today of all days you asked that question, because I sat down this morning with my son outside and both of us looked at each other and had a moment of, gosh, I feel really blessed. And even now I feel quite emotional. And I just realized in that moment that in the last few weeks I've said to myself, oh, I feel quite calm and I feel quite rested. And this morning I was like, wow, I think it's taken this long actually. for me to truly ground, you know, for the stress to really kind of have dissipated. It doesn't mean that it doesn't come in peaks and troughs. But what I've learned is that, you know, I have just had some stunning revelations within for myself during this time. You know, I've been pushed to kind of the brink. And like you said there, it's like so much has fallen away, so much has fallen apart. I've lost jobs, I've lost so much that I'm like, how am I going to survive? And then I've leaned into what I know to be true, and I've done the practices and worked with my heart and truly leaned into the possibility that there's something even greater still out there for me. And other, like even today, came off a phone call with another opportunity, but there have been days where I've thought, what is going on? And am I going to be okay? And I do have an inner core belief that there's a gift in every single thing that happens to us in this life. Like we might not immediately see the gift because, you know, we're kind of clouded in all sorts of different emotions and a heightened state of being. But there is always a gift and there's always learning, even when at the time it seems like the world is falling apart. And unfortunately, what I've learned about my own journey and what I see with my clients is that we do most of our growth during times of suffering, most of our personal growth. And you know, people who are super happy don't kind of sit down and go, I really want to sit down and do the work on myself. Like usually it takes you know, a traumatic life experience for us to go, okay, do you know what? Something's got to change. Like we will keep going and going and going and going, and we'll push ourselves to the brink of burnout, or something terrible will happen, or we'll lose our job, or we'll lose a loved one, and then we'll go, okay, something has to change in my life. And unfortunately, I wish it wasn't that way for most human beings, but unfortunately it is. And I think for a lot of people, you know, they've sat down and they've gone, okay, so I need to change something. There's stuff in my life that's just not working. And no better time than now, you
Very
know, to
true.
use this opportunity to maybe just, I mean, the amount of people that are trying meditation now is blowing my mind. Absolutely blowing my mind. I've been a guest on friends, you know, Instagram accounts, and just getting so many messages from people going, I would never have had any interest in meditation before, but I'm experiencing such a heightened sense of anxiety and I'm not sleeping that I thought I'll try anything. Like, so people are like, I'll try anything, even this meditation thing that I've heard about, which is really interesting. So, and you know what? If if thousands more meditators emerge from this time, what a beautiful world we'd be living in, you know?
Yeah.
So there is a gift in everything. And I see a massive, massive, massive shift in people and in their sense of awakening and understanding that they need to live more of life. Like the amount of people that have said to me, I need more joy, like more joy. Like I have no fun. I'm going to work, I'm coming home, and when I come home, I'm not in good form. And then I go to sleep and I get up and I do it again. And then I'm
And
so
again and
tired of the
again. Yeah.
weekend, I don't really enjoy anything. So people are like, where's the fun? Like, let's bring fun back, you know? And so that's a really positive thing as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, well, it's just like the transformation you've gone through over however many years of your life. You didn't really make the change until you felt like you had nothing to lose. You hit rock bottom. And it's kind of the same thing with meditation, but people have such, I don't know, differing ideas about what it is. And now they feel like they've exhausted every other avenue to relieve anxiety. So, okay, now I'll meditate. I'm thrilled too. I don't care why they come, as long as they come, you know, it's good. So one final question, which is, when you're feeling anxious, because, and I think it's important to say this, everybody feels anxiety. You know, you could be a lifelong meditator. It doesn't mean you're not human anymore. You're still going to feel periods of anxiety or frustration or any of the normal emotions everyone has. But when you hit that point that you're feeling very anxious, what is your go-to? What do you do to get recentered or to calm down quickly, or, you know, whatever your practice is? What is it?
It's breathing. For me, the breath is so powerful. And I always lean into my breath practices. And I struggled with anxiety, Teresa, for about 20 years of my life, chronic anxiety. Like I was medicated for that length of time. And that's why I leaned into alcohol, because it took the edge off my anxiety. And I was in this horrible cycle. And I do breath practices multiple times a day. even when I have absolutely no anxiety, because I know what it's like to go back there. But really, it's about becoming aware of your body and noticing the signs. So sometimes I'll miss the signs. So the whole idea, I always say, to catch it before it catches you. So to try and notice, what are the signs in your body? So for me, I start to get just a sense of ungroundedness, a little bit tetchy, and I start to get a tightness in my chest. And if it's gone the next step, I'll start to get sweaty palms, you know. And so what I do is I just stop in that moment and I do long, slow, deep breaths. So in through my nose. And then like I'm breathing out a straw through my mouth. So not forced, but slow. So, and I do several of those breaths. And then I do the 4-7-8 breath technique from Dr. Andrew Ryle, which is amazing. You breathe in for 4, hold for 7, and breathe out for 8. And breathing just signals a sense of safety to your body. And I actually do my breath practices until I feel I'm grounded. So some days that might be around a 7 or 8, and some days I might have to sit there for 10 minutes and do breathing. So some people are like, oh yeah, I did that for a minute and it didn't work. And it's like, oh no, 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 no. That's not how it works. Like, we have trained our bodies for an entire lifetime to be stressed. Like, most people actually approach their day from stress and they don't even realize it because they're in low-lying stress all the time. So they're kind of like getting up and approaching their goals and attacking their day from a place of stress. So using their cortisol and the adrenaline and, you know, drinking coffee every day. So very few people actually approach their day from a state of coherence. And that's why dropping down into your heart first thing in the morning, as soon as my eyes open, I place my hand on my heart in bed and I begin to practice heart focused breathing, and I set an intention for the day, simple, like today's a great day, everything is always working out for me. And I just sink into gratitude. So I'm signaling safety to my body, I'm bringing my body into coherence, and now I can begin going about my day from having a better chance, you know, of not getting stressed too quickly, because we all live in the real world and stress happens quickly. And our bodies remember stress quicker than it remembers relaxation. So it's the consistency of doing these practices. I find like I have to do the practices at this time multiple times a day. So before it would have been wake up and meditate before I go to bed. Now I'm like leaning into my practice multiple times throughout the day. And that's just to trying to keep myself on an even keel. So that shows us that everybody is struggling right now to kind of keep themselves centered in some shape or form. And because there's such a sense of insecurity and misinformation and all of these things going on in the outside world, and we're trying to kind of find our place in this space at the moment that's unknown and uncharted territory. And, you know, it's kind of like we're walking the plank. You know, we're not sure when we're going to fall off or get to the end, or if we're going to be able to get back to safety. And so I always say to people, when you're feeling that and that overwhelm comes, just bring yourself home. And home to me is my heart. Bring yourself home. If you can't do anything else, go there and just take a deep breath and just be in that moment, and keep doing that as often as you need to. It's like I always kind of say to people, this is the way we should be, you know, bounce back ability just a little bit, but this is the way we all are all the time, 24/7. We wake up like that. And then people wonder why they get sick, because if you keep pulling this every day, it's going to snap. You know, there's no resilience there. So it's important, I think. I don't think these practices are optional anymore. I don't. I
I
think they're
agree.
actually essential.
Yeah.
You know, years ago I would have said, yeah, you can meditate if you want to, or if you don't. I'm like, I don't think they're optional. And I think that's truly what we're learning about this time.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting because I've shifted my message in the workshops we do. Because I used to do the same thing and say, well, you could meditate, or you could, you know, I'd give them options. And now I'm saying, no, you must practice mindfulness. And like I'm dictating, but they do need to. So I very much agree with that. Well, I thank you so much for such useful and lovely information that I hope a lot of people will listen to and practice. I want to remind people too that if you're new to starting this, you may even need to set reminders for yourself to do it, because it's not a habit yet. But once you make it a habit, you'll find that you can much better self-regulate. You can remain calmer. When we're calmer, we make better decisions. We can think more clearly. And of course, we have more creativity. And I think all of that is very necessary right now maybe more than ever. So thank you, Alison, so much for sharing.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure. Thank you, Teresa.
Stay well. Bye-bye.